I'm doing a clap just for me.
Everybody loves the clap. Says nobody.
There's a statement. Michael John Atkins.
Oh my God. That was... I don't think anybody's called me that in years. Except not even my mother uses the full name.
I'm just going by what was on your website.
Oh, I love that. Is that actually on a website?
Yeah.
Is that on? What's it on?
I think it's on your Wikipedia.
Is it on my Wikipedia? I've got a Wikipedia.
Yeah. I think it says Dr. Cheddar Gorgeous, close brackets, Michael John Atkins.
My God, folks, I've made it. Like, do you know, like having a Wikipedia, that's like, I mean, lots of people have Wikipedia who aren't proper famous, but normally normally they have to write them themselves, don't they?
You're a big
Which
deal.
I didn't do. Do you know, but then I am and I'm not, right? So, and I talk about this a lot because you get, you either meet people, I feel like fame these days isn't what it used to be.
Go on.
Fame is very niche now. And so people operate in these weird little fame bubbles. And so I can meet people who have absolutely no clue who I am. Like regularly on a day-to-day basis, most of the people I come into contact with, they have absolutely no clue, or they're being incredibly polite, right? But you will also then meet people who treat you like you're Lady Gaga. They can't believe that somebody
is that when you're not in
totally
when you're not dressed up?
Yeah, totally. And so you'll have people who know who you are and can't conceive that they might ever be in the same public space as you. Like, and normally for me it's like because I'm shopping a Lidl or something like that, and so like they've bumped into you into the like cheap bit aisle in a Lidl, and they can't conceive. They think there's like a hidden camera somewhere, and it's like an actual kind of weird intervention. But and because believe it or not, I do just do my own shopping and live my own life, and so I don't think fame is what it used to be.
It's a fame's a funny one though, isn't it? Because it's a lot more available now than it used to be. I remember hearing a quote that was something like, "Fame is the perfume of talent," which I thought was just lovely, or should be the perfume of talent.
Sometimes, you know, the talent isn't necessary though.
But no, this is my point. But this is my point: is that it's so readily available now. I was reading about that poor girl who slept with 1,000 men a few weeks ago. You heard about her?
I heard about it from a driver I had the other day.
She's crazy famous now, but she's famous because she took 1,000 dicks.
Did she have a nice time?
No, she cried afterwards.
Oh no!
There was like a documentary that followed her throughout that day, which is just disgusting. I mean,
she cried afterwards.
And she cried afterwards.
That shouldn't.
And you're like,
so there was a similar documentary filmed a number of years ago, which I think was called something like Sex, and it followed a famous porn star at the time, and she similarly had set out. I don't think the numbers were that high then, but she set out to break the world record. So it's a concept that's happened before, and the documentaries happened before. And what was fascinating about that was that she had this. The first half of the documentary had this real. It leaned heavily into her rhetoric of liberation, of her body, her choice, they're all incredibly important things, which is why the first question I asked was, are we looking at this from her perspective, or are we looking at it from a moralistic judgment that's going to judge her? Because actually, if a woman desires to have sex with a lot of people with her body, there'll be no slut shaming from me. I've certainly had a lot of sex with a lot of people. And just mum. So deal with it, all right?
I'm going to assume she's already guessed at this
She
point.
knows. She doesn't have to guess.
I don't think this is news.
She knows. Yeah, we have. I insist on a level of openness with my mother that she absolutely despises. Well,
important.
I think it's important.
It's important. It's even better if it makes her uncomfortable.
Do you know what I mean? But so you have that thing of you've got to be careful not to come from moral judgment. But similarly, they spent the first half of the documentary going into her outlook or where she felt she was at the time she was going to do it. And obviously there was, of course, a lot of men around her who were kind of orchestrating that and making that happen. And then it followed her afterwards in the years following, and it delved into her history of abuse. It delved into her subsequent breakdown. And I don't know, I have a lot of feelings around the sex industry. I have a lot of feelings around, my research was around sex work.
I read your thesis.
Oh my God, really? I don't think I even did that. So
It was
writing it was enough.
It was one of the most eye-opening afternoons I think I've ever spent.
Oh, really? Good
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I've been to the gay village in Manchester. I know, I know what goes on. I've had some really wild, amazing times there. But to have it dissected from that viewpoint, i.e., the sex that goes on and cruising and all of that kind of thing, I'd never seen it in black and white. I'd never had it explained like that to me.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating,
incredible, and the drawings as well of all the canals and all that. I thought it was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And there's a really interesting section in that as well, because we're both ambassadors, aren't we, for survivors?
Yeah,
well, we are survivors in Manchester. And obviously, there's a piece in the thesis about Duncan.
About Duncan, yeah, very openly,
really open. I love that man.
I think what's fascinating about the way we often talk about sex work, and I think I wrote about this in the thesis, is that we have this notion that sex work is this block singular thing. And like, just to clarify, because I might have set up a bit of ambiguity just a moment ago where I said I have certain feelings around sex work. And that is to say I'm absolutely pro sex workers, right? I'm absolutely pro your body, your choice. I'm pro all of those things. I have lots of friends who work in sex work and have historically worked in sex work. And I think that one of the big problems with sex work is that we equate all of the different kinds of transactions of sex and money as this singular monolithic thing in sex work, which we place into a kind of strange hierarchy, instead of recognizing the individual context of whatever is happening in that person's life. And as a result, it prevents us from talking openly. So we either have come into sex work with this kind of shame-laden perspective that is going to prevent us from actually understanding what maybe the real risks and potential harms are, but also the potential benefits and the potential gains for that person and what that person really needs. So I just feel like we need to start, instead of thinking of things as sex work or this thing or this thing or the other, we start to look at the ecology of a person's life and what they need.
Yeah, and the social economic backgrounds that play a part in that, but it's all perpetuated by our media as well.
Totally,
sex work isn't a new. It's not a new occupation.
It's really not.
I don't know if you've known, but it's been around a long time.
It's been around a long time.
So it's the lack of safety guidelines. It's the lack of healthcare. It's the lack of we as a society we look down on these people. We just do, and that's perpetuated from the media.
Yeah, and then that creates a context which itself can cause harm. So in many ways, it doesn't matter what level of personal liberation you may feel. The reaction that you will gain from the context that you find yourself in and the judgment that you face will have an emotional impact. And that's it's a really tricky area to navigate.
But it's why people put themselves in dangerous situations.
I think sex is and this is where people will disagree with me, because I feel like sex is a very potent thing, right? It can be and the reason why I say can be is that I don't know, this may not be how it is for everyone. Sex can be, it comes with a lot of potential risk, like physical risk of harm, intimate situations. It also carries a great potential for emotional connection. It creates a great potential for the creation of intimacy. For some people, and maybe people who are more involved in sex work might disagree with that. They feel that actually that isn't how they regard sex. But I think sometimes, and as I said, I've known a lot of people who are involved in sex work, and some of them are absolutely fine and absolutely fabulous. Some of them think they're absolutely fine and absolutely fabulous, but because of the nature of how sex has worked in their lives, it is interacting in a way that they can't quite anticipate the outcome of in that particular moment. Do
you think because it's such an intimate
I think act? Because it's got a potency. Because like I said, I don't think it's necessarily intimate for everyone, because some people can have very detached sex. I have had very detached sex in my life. I have had very unenjoyable sex in my life. We can get into that. We can get into that later on if you like. But I think it's potent. And the reason why I say it's potent, regardless of whether you find it as an intimate act, is because it's potent for society. And it's potent in terms of, as I said, sexually transmitted diseases, considerations of intimacy, all of that stuff. But also it's potent because it's potent for the context that you find yourself in. So it's likely to have an impact on you regardless of your individual philosophy around it. And that's kind of a two-sided thing about you having an understanding of where you are and what you're able to manage and cope with, but also a wider thing where we unravel the mysticism around sex within our world, right? Because we don't talk about sex. We definitely don't talk about sex work, but we really don't talk a lot about the nuts and bolts of sex. The nuts and bolts of sex, so to speak. That was very phallic and very male-centric. We're on a male matters podcast.
It's not going to be the first time, is it?
Right? No, absolutely. So yeah, I think there is a veil of silence around sex in general, and a discomfort with unraveling and really adding language for us to be able to talk about and understand sexuality and sex. Partially because, it makes us feel awkward and strange and dangerous, but also partly because our pleasures and our desires are often enmeshed within that veil of silence. And there is the fear that if we disrupt that, we take away the pleasure, which is what a lot of my work prior to the sex work I did, which was about cruising. So I did, my MA was about cruising, and that weird, not that weird, I suppose. People have been doing it for a long time. The desire to disconnect socially from the person you were having sex with, because knowing about them ended up disrupting the fantasy you had of them.
So it becomes transactional.
It becomes more about your fantasy of a person than the reality of connection on offer.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? You're connecting with that. And I think we see that all of the time with the way that we do dating these days through dating apps. We reduce ourselves and each other to these profiles, right? A combination of an image and a small piece of text within which I am going to project a desirable image of myself, or who I really am.
Yeah.
Because that's
I'm going to show you that one bit of me.
Yeah, and absolutely. So and I think if you can embrace that and actually genuinely within that small frame give a person a perspective of who you are, that's wonderful. But most of the time, people I find are playing to the audience. They wish to, and I speak from experience, you wish to project a particular fantasy of yourself that makes yourself desirable in order to gain access to the fantasies of those other people that you're trying to connect with. So I find a lot of the time that intimacy now, particularly mediated by the digital world, is a case of fantasies chatting up other fantasies in the hope of having a fantasy experience.
Yeah.
And in that, we lose some of the real potential for some quite cool, fun connections.
But
We've gone very deep, very quickly.
I'm here for it.
Go deep or go home, darling.
I'm here for it. But you mentioned then about the kind of digital age that we live in. It's not just dating apps. It's everything.
Yes.
We project that image of ourselves onto Instagram, onto X, onto LinkedIn to a degree. All of it. We've lost that connection, that human that understanding. That's what I really miss is that getting to know someone, because it all just feels so flimsy.
Well, not only have we, so there's some different things at play there for me, right? So if we think about how we present ourselves online, we present simplifications of ourselves online, which is fine. To a certain extent, we're always presenting simplifications of ourselves to each other when we meet each other, right?
Yeah.
The issue is that we've begun to, if you like, add so much meat to those simplifications of ourselves that the fantasy of ourselves becomes a kind of reality that we have to attempt to live up to constantly.
That's exhausting. It's
exhausting. And that we emphasize only those bits of ourselves that are perfect. And I think that works in different ways. You can talk about that in the idea of the projection of wealth, the projection of living a certain lifestyle, but also the projection of never having a bad thought, the projection of never saying, I couldn't possibly say anything wrong. I couldn't ever give a wrong opinion. I couldn't ever say something that I then might change my mind about, because that would be devastating. because you can be cancelled for that. And I mean that what we've lost through those projections of fantasy is the ability to have a dialogue that doesn't come with a huge amount of threat. You know, so I feel there is a real difficulty now to have complex, nuanced, and honest conversations.
I agree.
And I think that ends up contributing, ironically, to the growth of real hate. Because it becomes weaponized in that, well, if I can't have a discussion about this or that, then all of that must be wrong. And so, in other words, so if I can't have a discussion around, so I love talking about queerness, because I think a lot of the time many queer people misunderstand maybe what queerness might really offer us. Yet I know a lot of people would feel awkward or strange about being like, so then what's all this queerness about then? Right? There is a fear to discuss that. For fear of offending the most sensitive person who is out there.
Middle England.
Middle England, obviously, white, middle class, heterosexuals. There is a
let's put Daily Mail readers in a box.
Right, there you go. But there's a fear of offending. You don't know who you're going to offend, and I always think the kinds of interactions, the kinds of performances that I used to do in nightclubs, and let's be very clear here, right? I am very woke. Like you would, if you examined my views, I'm sure a lot of people would find me very quote unquote woke, right? I'm very left leaning, and I feel that pressure that sometimes I'm unable to speak about things.
And yet, sorry to interrupt, but yet you do though, because one of the things that I love the most about your the voice that you have on Instagram, for example. Let's just take Instagram. I really love that because you do speak openly and you do speak honestly, and you're not playing a character, and you're not. It doesn't feel to me like you're living up to, a public perception of you. You are actually real, and you are talking about these things.
But what is real in that sense, right? Because actually, these simulations of ourselves that we are all now rehearsing constantly and doing constantly, that have become integrated into the way that we form friendships, the way that we communicate with one another, they become the reality. They become performative, for want of a better expression. So if we're thinking Judith Butler, right, which we don't know whether you want to go there, Judith Butler, big gender theorist. And people, I think, often misunderstand this because they think when I say performative, they think I mean like performance, so like falseness. But the way Butler talked about performativity was that the actions that you do, the ways that you present, the things that are semi-rehearsed, but also that they end up feeling natural. So I think the way all this stuff that we're doing comes to constitute who we are, right? But that doesn't change the fact that who we might be becoming is manifested with or is influenced and manifested by these platforms that encourage us to think of ourselves and present ourselves in particular ways, and argue with each other in particular ways and fall out. So I think we've lost an element there around a freedom of dialogue, but we've also lost a kind of face-to-face threat that encourages empathy. So I was talking about this on that because I try and talk to people all of the time, like to the extent where like my friends find it weird. I will try and have a conversation, and I'm sure some of the people I have conversations with find it weird as well. I try and have a conversation with the people serving me in Tesco's. I can't stand the auto machines. Like I can't do it. Like it makes me feel ill because I lose that opportunity to have a connection with somebody, or have a dialogue, or learn something about somebody. So I had a chat with these guys on the train today, and actually, like, we were all white skinheads, right? And they were talking to me about how people don't normally talk to them because they're white skinheads. And they were nice guys. They'd been and bought some records. Like they were Scousers. They were not. Oh, sorry, they're from Birkenhead. So it was like they weren't Scousers.
They were wolves,
right? So the But we were talking about the fact that because we're so used to communicating with one another through our phones, and our phones and many other things, whether it be gaming or whether it be drugs or whether it be sex, there are these little routes where we can cut ourselves off from the reality around us, escapes from the reality around us. And as a result, we don't have a face-to-face conversation. And I don't face up to the fact that I am with a person who I don't know their opinion, and I have to be civil and cautious and create a bond of empathy, because I don't know whether you're going to, you know, and particularly as a queer person, I don't know whether you're going to take exception to me, you know? So we've lost that ability to have a civil dialogue as well.
But that's where the interesting stuff happens, though.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? When you're face to face and you're learning about someone and you're finding a commonality, and you're finding. I love that. In fact, I really like sitting down with people who have views that are completely opposite to mine. I love sitting down with people from the right, for example. I love
it's so important.
It's so important.
And so important.
We've lost that ability, and it is. You mentioned the word empathy there, and it absolutely is. When you talk about wokeness and you talk about empathy, that those words are sort of vilified now, but they're the actual kind of backbone of a working society, of a community. It feeds into the fact that the community, the sense of community, doesn't exist anymore. And that's what I think
it does. It's disparate, right? So I can have a little group of friends who are in community with one another, and somebody else can have a little group of fascists who are in community with one another. Not necessarily. I've got my fascists. They've got their fascists. So you have these kind of little bubbles, but unfortunately, we don't live in a world where we're not going to come into contact with one another, and where our opinions of each other are not going to have an impact. And so you have to find this place in between. And I think what both the right and the left often struggle with is the idea that, you know what, there are some people out there, I'm just never going to change their mind about some shit. And you know what? I don't need to. I don't need to change that group of people's mind about shit. I just don't. Like, I do need legal protection. I do need for us to find a place where we are both catered for, where that person who I don't agree with is able to access the services and things that they need in their lives, as long as they don't breach upon mine. In the same way that I need to be able to access the services and things that I need in my life without breaching their right to think whatever the hell they want to think, right? And it's that middle place we've lost. And I think the thing that the internet offered us was this amazing place where everyone came together, except the issue is that instead of coming together in dialogue, those platforms, and I'm speaking very specifically about social media, those platforms are actually there as an advertising space, which is the big misconception. It's not social media, it's advertising media. Let's start calling it what it is. And that advertising media is driven by an attention economy. And that attention economy is best served by the proliferation of conflict.
Rage bait.
Which is why, you see, so I worked in Liverpool, which is where we are today, folks.
You know that.
Yeah. So I worked in Liverpool for years, and I worked around public perceptions of Liverpool. And we used to do, we did this kind of mass study about newspaper articles. And it was looking at the impact that the 2008 European Capital of Culture had on Liverpool. And what we were looking for, bad science to a certain extent, because we were hoping to find something. You should go into thinking, what will you find? What we were expecting to find was that post-2008, and we were codifying news reports, basically. We were looking at news reports from all the different newspapers, everything that was written from that point, from 2008 onwards and before. So we codified the 10 years before. And was it about violence? Was it about culture? Was it about sport? What was it about? Was it positive view of Liverpool? Was it a negative view of Liverpool? So it was all codifying these articles. And then the period afterwards, we were expecting to see that the 2008 Capital of Culture increased people's perceptions of Liverpool. That was the hope. But what we found was that started to happen until about 2012. And then strangely, at 2012, all of our statistics started to get really, really peculiarly screwed up. And we were like, oh, we're seeing like this massive rise in violence. We're seeing this massive rise in drama, in kind of gangster stories. And we were like, what is going on here? Because crime wasn't changing. It wasn't like there was more crime. But what I realized was that around that point, 2012, we started to see the dominance of clickbait-based media and news reporting. And so what you then have is this bulk of news that is produced, which is dependent not on whether you're telling the truth, but whether you get people to look at it. And as a result, people look at it because, oh, there was a crime down there, down so-and-so street the other day. Oh, there was this shooting down there the other day. Because that drove the newspaper's ability
engagement
to create ad revenue. And we see the same on social media. We are being baited. We are being set against one another. And what has begun as a thing that is ultimately within the system about getting us to look at social media and stay focused on social media. And the design of social media has become increasingly addictive, intentionally. This has been ignored in a lot of, you see the online safety bill coming out, very focused on content, which is absolutely an important issue. It's really important to not have fucking horrible shit. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, swear.
Great. Very important not to have fucking horrible shit on the internet and on social media. Really important to kind of, I believe, to police some of that. But what they didn't pick up on, which the Facebook whistleblower talked about, was the fact that these platforms are designed to be addictive. And we are giving them to children.
Yeah.
We are allowing children to have access to them and then complaining that children experience negative content, which, as I said, is an important issue. How about the fact that we are handing children access to addictive platforms that are designed to increase conflict, increase their engagement with them, keep them focused on them, shape their brains to become dependent upon them, woven into the way we see ourselves, the way we connect with one another. And now we understand, actually, are part of a huge distraction apparatus that is designed to prevent us from realizing the shitty state of inequality and the growth of oligarchy.
Amen to that. I read a piece on, this is a couple of months ago, on the TikTok algorithm and how the TikTok algorithm is put together and how deep it goes. There are layers upon layers upon layers of this shit. If we both have TikTok on our phones now, you and I, it will know that we're in the same room together. It will know what you're interested in. It will know what you've spoken about. It will know where our common ground is, what our commonality is. And it will be able to feed into that to keep us on that platform as long as humanly possible. And it makes you feel like, and I'm guilty of this, I've had to delete it off my phone. I only use it for this purpose now. Because I was spending, like, it would go to an hour and then it would be 2 hours. And I'd be like, what am I doing?
Yes.
I'm pissing away my time.
Addiction.
And it cons you. And similar to any kind of addiction, really, it gives you that dopamine fix and it gives you that little hit and it makes you feel like you're learning and, oh, this is a fascinating, oh, this is interesting. Yeah. It's so inane and so...
Well, and also then simultaneously profound, right? And this is like, and Roland Barthes talked about this in the 70s, right? So, and he was talking about it in terms of magazines. This is an idea that's been around a long time. You're getting highly, like, daft content with cats. I'm flicking through my stories. A fabulous cat video. Oh my God, it's so cute. Devastation in Palestine.
Yeah.
Onto somebody having a serious discussion about addiction. Onto sexy man, like in swimwear. Onto devastating images in the Congo. And this kind of constant up and down, up and down, up and down, desensitize, distraction. We are actively engaging in the ruining of our own brains. And what's difficult for me now, and I know will be difficult for you, and is difficult for all the content creators out there, is that we are complicit. Regardless of the content that we create, we are complicit in this process that is occurring with people's brains. We may wish to present ourselves as artists and educators and doing positive and wonderful things in the world. But ultimately, the forum in which we are able to do it, although podcasts aside, right, because it's a very different thing when we're thinking in long form.
Yeah, I feel like morally,
but in terms
we're
of,
okay.
Yeah, but in terms of the advertising of it, right, we engage with these systems that are designed to make everyone feel worse and to make people feel desensitized and to make people feel like there's no
But we don't
hope.
have a choice, though.
There we go.
Do we have a choice?
Isn't that the Squid Game? Like, do you know, and like that's
yeah,
the thing about Squid Game. And I said this recently in a post, and my manager was like, "What do you mean it's the Squid Game?" And I was like, "Because this, if you've seen the television show Squid Game, which is South Korean show, and it's about this kind of deadly game that people become caught up in, and they're aiming to win the pile of money. The issue is that we believe there is no way to play the game except by their rules, and Squid Game." I'm not keen on it as a show. I think it's a brilliant show, but it plays into that idea that there is no hope to exist outside of this game. And the truth is, people are existing outside of this game. You know, people do have jobs. People aren't on social media. They are keeping on going. But like a lot of fame and celebrity and myth of meritocracy, you know, the people who are successful are dying to hold on to that success. And they are becoming the example that says to all of those other people out there engaging, this could be you. Same as Bitcoin. It's all of that shit. There are a few people who are doing all right from it, and we become the myth that's propagated. TikTok, right? That's the tragedy of TikTok being banned. Are you kidding me? Like, I get that the reason why it was banned and the reason why the US government was banned was shady. I get it. But you know what? I did not mourn. I'm not on TikTok. But I also, if they did the same to Instagram, which I am on, and has been incredibly useful to me, and is, as you say, we're kind of trapped. It's the center of any semblance of power that I have, right? Any semblance of influence and power, ability to earn, all of that
yours.
stuff. But it's not mine. It's not mine. And that's the delusion. And so that's the wake-up call, right? TikTok, it's not yours. This is not a free communication platform. Not only is it not a free communication platform, it is actively designed to harm people's brains. Like, it is designed to keep people addicted. And Trump brought it back for you. All hail, right? And so there's this weird kind of relationship now where, and I saw very radical, left-wingy, you know, suddenly people who are on TikTok who suddenly had this crisis of like, well, at least Trump brought us back TikTok. I'm like, no, this stuff is not good for us. And whilst I am, the other thing that you get into now is if me as a person who's on these platforms says it, hypocrite, right? Realist, right? At the moment in my life, I am engaging with it. I'm seeking ways to not engage with it, but I'm engaging with it strategically and I'm doing it transparently.
What's the answer?
The answer for me, in terms of social media,
yeah, what can we do?
Governments can regulate very specifically the inclusion of addictive elements in the designs of social media platforms. Right? I am not a Luddite. Like, I loved social media. I adored it. I owe it so much. Like, I am so grateful for what it gave me. But we have seen it change. And we have seen it change from a portfolio-like system, an address book-like system, into increasingly addiction-led, conflict-led, advertising space-led systems. And we need to be quite specific. This isn't about banning social media. This isn't about turning off the internet. This is about saying there is an addictive element that is designed into these platforms which should not be allowed. And that's what needs to be regulated. That's what we need to put our attention on. Sure, banning really horrible content, really important. Banning self-harm, banning encouraging others to do violence. Sure. Banning when people are just being hateful knobheads. I mean, to be fair, I don't mind the occasional hateful knobhead. Do you know what I mean? Because it's something I've faced my entire life. And yeah, it can be really horrible and toxic, but it makes me aware that those people exist. I'd rather I knew they existed that opinion was out there than me not knowing where the fuck it was, because that's how I grew up, not knowing who was going to fucking come for me. So but the regulation of those elements for me, that's what we're not focusing on, because that is ultimately what's turning us against one another and ruining our ability to engage with each other.
Yeah.
And let's talk about men's mental health.
Well, that's the biggest one for me is if you look at the rise of red pill ideology and all of this.
What happened to ecstasy? I mean, come on, everybody loved each other on ecstasy. Why all this red pill nonsense?
Yeah, that basically. Why can't we just love each other?
But I'm not encouraging you to do ecstasy.
No.
Ecstasy is a very serious drug, kids. That was actually what we call a parody. It was a little bit of overinflated dramatization.
We were sending ourselves up.
We were sending ourselves up. I actually need to tell you that I am a really sober motherfucker. So I'm not encouraging you to do anything. Pretty much these days. Yeah, pretty much. There's not much that I'll bother touching.
That's brilliant.
No. Yeah, it's great. It's great. Well, except for this.
Yeah.
This nonsense. Coffee.
I'm very similar. I'm in the same boat as you. It's a lovely boat to be in.
Yeah.
It's a happy boat. Yeah.
Get in there.
Yeah. I've become addicted now to waking up in the morning with a clear head, and it's such a lovely feeling, isn't it? Waking up and having a whole day in front of you to do what you want, rather than waking up feeling anxious and tired and miserable and full of shame and regret and all of those things.
Well, which way do you want to go first? Do you want to go down that route? Because I can absolutely talk to that. Or are we talking red pill?
Let's go red pill.
Let's go red pill.
Tell
me about red pill.
Well, there's this whole sort of subsection of society, young men, who have the most violent views of women, the most unbelievable things that they believe, perpetuated by people like Andrew Tate. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't pre-warn you. I was going to drop the T-bomb.
Yeah, carry on.
But we've got this beast that is being fed constantly, and there's a huge concern for parents out there, and it's having real world consequences now. And I don't know what the answer is, because if you go onto social media, you are then bombarded with videos of men who are quote unquote successful, doing well, who have nice cars, who have nice lavish lifestyles, who have beautiful women, who have all of these trappings, and they're shouting at these young men that if you want what I've got, you need to behave as I do.
To be a monster.
Yeah.
You need to be a demon.
Yeah. Exactly. And I don't know what the answer is, other than what we kind of briefly touched on, which was more of a sense of community, more of a sense of connection, getting people out of their bedrooms and off their phones. But that's kind of impossible.
But how about a bit of positive ideation for men too, right? How about a bit of, so all of those things that you describe, the kind of image of a successful man, the car, the woman, the bitches, do you know what I mean? All of that stuff, right? Which, we can label toxic, right? I think, so Andrew aside, right? Because I don't get Andrew Tate in terms of, by that, I don't get how he became so popular, because there are absolutely other softer ones who I also don't particularly agree with, who kind of make sense to me. Jordan Peterson makes sense to me. I get, I don't agree with everything he says, and actually I think he's becoming incredibly hateful.
He's become a parody of himself.
He's become a bit of a parody of himself, but when he started, there was an element of truth, as with a lot of right-leaning thinkers who end up kind of leaning a little bit too far. There's an element of truth that Jordan Peterson absolutely picked up on, rightly identified, and then capitalized on. Right, so let's not remove from this the economics of the situation.
Yeah, it's a business.
It's absolutely a business, and all of those things of ideation you see for men, the ideals that these things put out, the big cars, the Bitcoin, all of that stuff, it revolves around a certain image of a successful man within a certain image of capitalism, which is again about this kind of meritocratic delusion. He made it, so can you, right? Keeps everybody wound into the same fucking bullshit. But at the same, and we can absolutely identify that as problematic. just as there's a ton of stuff Jordan Peterson has said that I find problematic. But I get who he was talking to. And that beast is not new. And we can't deny that to a certain extent, we have also played a role in its creation. And by that, I mean that there has been, rightly so, a huge recognition of some horrible dynamics between men and women in our society, between heterosexuality and homosexuality, between cisgender and transgender. You know, there's been a huge recognition of the incredible harm that a certain image that we tie to masculinity has done to people. The Me Too movement was so critically important. But while we had that, we also, instead of identifying those qualities, we lean very heavily into the idea that masculinity was innately somehow toxic. And I think that there is a certain job that needs to be done. So I did a show last year called Alien Cowboy.
Of course,
Alien Cowboy, a redemption arc for masculinity, part 1, because there is a part 2 about Sailor, which I haven't done yet. But what it talked about was, and I am somebody who masculinity has been a rod that I've held over my own back for years and not living up to it. But we have an understanding, an incredibly important understanding of some of the negative things that we might associate with masculinity, which are also kind of associated with colonialism, with a certain kind of capitalism that we have that dominates our world. And you notice I'm being very careful in saying a certain kind of capitalism, because I'm certainly not rejecting all manifestations of capitalism. And I also think there are certain manifestations in the other direction that are equally susceptible to corruption. But what we don't fixate enough on is those positive images of masculinity, you know, that we might also build men's sense of identity around.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
patience,
care,
strength of character.
Oh my God, resilience,
being of service.
Right,
men who are of service is the most masculine.
Do you know what I mean? Like protecting the vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? And don't get me wrong, you could absolutely go, that is a patronizing energy, unless that fucking person needs your help. In which case, as a person who has sometimes needed the help of a gang of men, because another group of men is threatening me, or sometimes, you know, I have been threatened also by women. That's the joy of being a very openly queer-looking person. You know, there is... If that protection is called for, that's a pretty good quality. And don't get me wrong, women can have it too, but women can also have some of the qualities that we associate as a toxic masculine trait, right? So there is a broader problematizing of the negative connotations to masculinity that I think we hold, particularly on the left. And I say that without denying. So let's see, I'm also very conscious that I'm going to be pulled up on this. And I say that whilst being incredibly aware of the predominant violence done by men toward women, right? And the kind of that dynamic persists. Although I am also aware that statistically speaking, at the moment in our world, it's men on men violence that's the fucking shit. You know what I mean? Because you have this beast being created. And I think we need to focus more. And one of the things that I said in my show is that it's really important that we have strong male role models still present, whilst also having strong women present too. I'm into both. And also trans people present. Oh, why not non-binary people as well? I'm into all of that hippy-dippy shit. I'm here for it. Like, I live by it. But we do need to make sure that we maintain a positive image for men. And we don't just problematize it.
I think part of that involves calling it out.
Yeah.
Involves the most masculine of men. Calling this shit out, calling it what it is.
Gets me going though. There's nothing sexier than a big butch masculine man like coming at somebody for being a racist. Do you know what I mean? It gets my juices flowing. There was this really brilliant video, and it was I say it's brilliant, it's horrible in another respect. So it was this lineup, it was a dating show, I assume, and it was this lineup of women who all had these balloons. And it was something about, I think the man had to pop the balloons, right, as the thing went along. I mean, God, it's already a problematic concept. But the guy walked on set, and there was this line of women, they're all holding the balloons. And there was a woman, I actually don't know whether she was transgender, but I assume she looked more visibly transgender. She was more legibly transgender than the other lineup. And this guy, as he walked on set, he ran right up to her, popped a balloon. Because obviously the idea is you play the game and you ask questions and over it goes along. Popped the balloon, walked into his position. And what was so wonderful to see, the other women, they all fucking popped their own balloon because they didn't want him anymore. Oh. Do you know what I mean? It was such a wonderful moment of solidarity.
There's lovely power in that, isn't there?
Oh, what a moment of solidarity. Do you know what, mate? You're not sexy.
Yeah.
Like Andrew Tate, not sexy. I don't know the women who are having sex with Andrew Tate, but I hope they're being paid well. I'm sure they're being paid. I
think we're legally bound to say that they have been paid. Actually.
Oh God, yeah, it's known, isn't it? Right. To be fair, some of them weren't paid.
I think he has been done for sex trafficking.
Yes, right. That doesn't mean they're being paid. So in terms of the Andrew Tates of this world, like you are making yourself less desirable, except to that system which wishes to prop you up because you're propping them up. And I think we need to find these new ways of speaking about masculinity and being comfortable with it. Because if we don't find, it's a radical thing to say, I know, I believe that everybody should experience joy in their gender, even men. And I truly believe that people should feel happy and safe and comfortable in their gender, and they should have places to go that serve society, that serve each other. And if we don't, there are other voices calling to those men. And that's what we're seeing. We're going to end up with the most problematic boys. They're going to be who calls your sons and your brothers. Yeah. And we're not going to like the men they become. We don't. Yeah. So that's how I feel about that whole red pill mentality. But you have to remember that these systems that we're talking about, they are driven by that. They want us to stay at each other's throats. They want us to stay in a binary conflict.
Because, as you said at the top of the show, it's advertising space.
It's advertising space. This is feeding
the beast.
The broligarchy.
Oh, nice.
It's what they call it now, the broligarchy.
Is it?
Yeah. Do you know, like that kind of Musk and what's his name? The one that looks like couldn't say boo to a goose. Zuckerberg, that's the one.
Zuckerberg, who's had a glow up.
Has he?
Have you not seen Zuckerberg now?
I mean, I've seen him. I don't think I'd ever find him attractive.
He's had a perm and he wears a chain now. and get this right. Get this. He was wheeled out at a UFC fight, which is hyper masculine.
To get battered?
No.
Damn.
He carried a belt.
A what?
He carried the belt out for the fighters to fight over, and he honestly, Joe Rogan and all that lot led Zuckerberg out, and Zuckerberg is trying so hard, to be a bro. And
Did you hear about Elon Musk paying teenagers? I don't know if it's teenagers to play video games. He paid people to play video games. He might not be a teenager. Don't sue me.
He's been dining out on the fact that he is the number one Diablo player, which is one of the geekiest games I think you can play.
Yeah,
all power to the geeks.
Yeah.
But to lie about something like that,
it's hilarious.
You're not even cool to nerds, dude.
Yeah.
Give it up, man.
Give it up. But
what I don't understand, right? Just to stay on the subject of these billionaires,
it's
right,
so important.
What I don't understand is, right, and I can only use myself as an example of this. If I was a billionaire, right, I would spend my entire life doing mad shit.
Yeah.
I would spend mad shit. I do silly shit.
Think of the fun you could have.
Oh my God.
Think of the people you could help.
Oh, it could be
you could be loved.
But you could just do crazy shit all the time and have the best life. You know the guy who invented MySpace? Yeah. Do you know what he does?
Well, what's he
Fuck all.
Yeah.
He sold MySpace for millions and millions. Tom, his name is. He completely retired, I think, from social media. He spends his time traveling the world and taking photographs.
Oh, nice.
That's all Tom does.
Nice. But you could do something more, Tom. I'm just saying, pull your fucking finger out. There's situations, Tom, you could get involved.
We're counting on you, Tom.
If you're listening, Tom, I know you are. Get off your ass, mate. But but then that particular, and like, so that kind of narcissistic, the kind of peak narcissism of Trump and Musk is fragile, right? And so they need their position in the hierarchy, or their perceived position in the hierarchy. And that's ultimately, it's a misunderstanding, I think, between status and hierarchical power, or the kind of hierarchical status power, the perception of status, which I think wealth often really works towards, and real power. And I often think that, and don't get me wrong, these people also have real power now. They have real power.
They're running the world.
It's
now.
They have such control, but it is so fragile. And I think sometimes that they don't realize the thing that they are tapping into. So the Donald Trump's releasing of the Capitol rioters. I know not all of them were still in prison, but the pardoning of the Capitol rioters. I don't think he really knows who he's dealing with, because those people, they got a very different kind of power. They have a very different kind of power. But I feel that we focus so much on that fragile, the look of power, the look of status, the shit that doesn't matter. Because you know who the stronger man is? The man who goes, oh, I'm shit at Diablo. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because I'm a fucking great guy. You know, I'm really crap at that. But you know what? Actually, I'm dead good at it.
Well, it's being authentic, isn't it?
Do you know, I feel like a man who genuinely felt like he had achieved the successes and cared about humanity in the way that Musk sometimes claims to, wouldn't give a shit about Diablo.
No, he wouldn't. And he also wouldn't be anywhere near the White House. He'd be doing philanthropy. He'd be helping. He'd be making a difference. And
you know, one thing that, so many years ago, when Musk was kind of this kooky weed smoking person, like, you know, billionaire who went on podcasts and at least was doing interesting stuff with his money, because I am not against the idea of humanity becoming an interplanetary species, right? I think there's other stuff we need to spend the money on. I think actually it's imperative that in order for humanity to become an interplanetary species, we need to sort our own planet out first, because we're not quite ready yet, tech-wise, to become an interplanetary species. We've probably got another 200 years to go.
We're years away.
Yeah, we've got another 200 years. We've got to survive on this planet for another 200 years, and we've got to get along with one another and put a focus into science and art and exploration and all of this stuff.
Community.
We need to build a world that is dedicated towards the furtherment of humanity. And so I respect that long-termism. You know, I respect that idea. But what I've been looking at this stuff recently. Mars? You don't want to go to Mars? There's no bloody water there. You don't want to go to Mars? He's like, we're going to drop bombs on it. We're going to tear it. You're not. There's no magnetosphere.
You can't terraform Mars yet.
You probably could never. Like, so this is the weird thing about Mars, is that Mars is not... Mars is a sci-fi fantasy, right? Mars is it's a rock, it's a dead planet, it's cold, there's no magnetosphere, there's no way to hold an atmosphere currently. And there are pie in the sky ideas of how you might try and make that happen. But most of those, they're just not particularly useful because of the way, I think it's something to do with the level of water that's at the polar ice caps is never enough to create that chain reaction that you need. Titan is where you need to go, but it's a longer term objective, because it'll take us 7 years or whatever it is to get to Titan, you know, to get a manned mission to Titan. So we need to know some stuff about the human body. We need to know some stuff about augmentation. We need to know some stuff about how we create gravity. We need to know how to create systems that produce water and allow to the recycling of water and all of that sort of stuff. There's a bunch of work we need to do here first on this planet that is so much easier to live on for now. Before we start to think about that. But I respected Musk's idea of the long term. I just think that for Elon Musk, it's about him getting us to Mars, not about humanity getting to Mars. Whereas anybody who really understands how that kind of change will work in humanity, you have to let go of ego, because we're talking about a 300-year model of change. There's no ego for you. There's no reward.
You won't be here.
You won't be here. You'll be dead. You will be gone. You will be dead. And I think there is an existential terror for people like that, because you know what, you're going to die.
Well, it's about legacy, isn't it? I don't understand this. I don't understand the principle of legacy. I never really have, if I'm honest. I've never thought beyond my own existence. I don't.
But I don't think they're thinking of legacy, because I think they're trying to live forever. And I think that they're two different things, right? Like, so sure, legacy, your name being spoken is one thing. But there are plenty of terrible people who did terrible things whose names we still remember.
If you want a legacy, you can just be a serial killer.
Do you know what I mean? Like, there's plenty of terrible people who get remembered. I think what's interesting for me, or I think there is an egotistical way to think of legacy, and there is a less egotistical way to think of legacy. Because all humans have legacy in all kinds of different ways. Whether it be what happens to your genetic material when you have children and what that grows in the world. You can be the shittest parent, right? But you don't know what your child's going to do. You don't know what your grandchild's going to do. Like there is different kinds of ways that as beings we have rippling impacts on our entire species, and we all are involved in that. The issue is just whether you're getting credit for it, right? So you can absolutely live a life of kindness, teach other people about kindness, encourage people to listen to one another, encourage people to think critically, in the hope that skill set will lead us to a better horizon collectively. You never get given credit for that, and it's fine. That's meaning. You know, if you can embrace a life that has that, that's giving your life meaning. And I think a lot of what we see in men is a crisis in meaning. We have lost what. Interesting.
What are they doing?
Are they having a fun time in there?
Blake, what are they doing next door? An improv group, of course. We'll go and join them.
There's a real crisis in meaning for men, and I think I look back. My dad was a factory worker, and to be fair, he was a factory worker at the time when the living wage existed. So it was a very different time to be a factory worker. You could raise your family, be a breadwinner. Like these stories that we had that gave men's life meaning.
Identity.
It was, work at that very working class community, and we can problematize it till the cows come home, right? But the world at that point, as it was, the men felt they had meaning in their world. Sometimes they were shitheads, just like they are shitheads today. But the vast majority of men went and they worked and they were breadwinners and they were there. They understood.
Yeah, there was a simple quality to it.
They understood what their role, what their purpose, what the meaning of their life was. And sure, there's always outliers who didn't fit into it. There were gay people back then who couldn't find a place in that world, and it was tough, and life was fucking hard for people. But men had more of a purpose. It was easier for them. Not easier for them, that's the wrong way to put it. Men had more of a purpose. They had a semblance of meaning. And since, Thatcherite Britain, since the kind of destabilization of what we think of as working class identity, the growing inequality in our world, men no longer have that. Regular men, not all men, regular men. I think there's a vast majority of men who I think struggle with a place to go. And that crisis in meaning makes you look to nihilism. Trump and Musk, for all their grandeur and their business creation, and they're seeking the highest offices in the land, there is a nihilism to them. The pursuit of pleasure, total power, the pursuit of power above all else, the pursuit of wealth above all else, because this is the moment that matters. And I think we're seeing that with a lot of men. We don't know what our lives are to mean. And I think we have to give ourselves new stories. Do you know anything about existential crisis?
I think I know what it means, but go on.
You've experienced it, I'm sure.
Oh, yes.
So that notion that, when you lose that core sense of meaning, or the thing that you thought was the point, right? To the world, to your life, to existence, to everything, suddenly isn't the point anymore. Or you understand that somebody else has a different understanding of the universe, and all that stuff starts to fragment. All this stuff that I thought was solid and clear, it feels really shaky. The meaning of your world drops apart. Existential crisis. You slip into despair. Well, if there's no point, then what do I do? Right? And that can take you in several different directions. One of those directions is nihilism, pursuit of pleasure. Sums up Andrew Tate, doesn't it? My pleasure above all else, narcissistic. All that matters is feeling good all the time. Right now. Having it now. Doing it now. Right? Getting them to love me now. Right? And that's absolutely a path that you see a lot of people taking. The other thing is to try and, the other place is despair. Right? Despair, suicide, which we see a lot of men heading towards.
Well, yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I'd say the other route is service. That for me, I think, is the most important.
But that's
thing.
how because you've constructed new meaning for yourself.
Yeah, I've had to.
Right, you had to.
because when we talk about that immediate pleasure, that was how I spent my 20s and my 30s.
You went there.
Yeah, I went there. I've experienced that. I know what that feels like. I know how transient that feeling is.
Yeah.
And now the person that I am now, if I feel like, if I wake up and I feel like my life lacks any kind of direction, or you know, this a feeling of being a bit lost, and as you said, the existential crisis of everything falling apart, I can lean into service. Right? What can I do today that's going to help someone? What can I do to, you know, to be a vessel for good? That's all we can do.
I feel like we really need we need more stories about good men.
Yeah, we do.
And what being a good man looks like.
I
And that
agree.
for me is like a really beautiful image of what it is to be a good man.
I think so.
The idea of service, care, all of that stuff. Let's build like male identity around that, men's identities around that. Let's enjoy, let's revel in that. And I think that's sometimes what we don't discuss enough. It's very important to point out the problems. It's very important to point out where too much pursuit of pleasure, or too much greed, or too much violence, or too much aggression, or too much dominance. It's very, and we, you know, don't get me wrong, I like a bit of dominance every now and then, in the right place, in a playful way, and always consensually. But it's really important to talk about that stuff, and to set boundaries around that stuff. But also, it has to be met on the other side. If we're not going there, where are we going to put that oomph? Where are we going to let men go? Let's let them go to this beautiful place. Let's give new stories to men, and say that there's a way, absolutely, to be a good man in this world. And that's not, like I said, I am not denying the other stuff and its importance, because we have to call out shit when we see. In fact, as you said, that should be woven into that narrative. A good man calls bad shit out, right? A good person does that. A good woman, a good person.
We have to start young, though. That's the thing for me. We have to start at school level, education level. That's where we make an impact. That's where we change the narrative and the future that we're heading towards. Is through education.
Yeah.
But I don't know what that looks like on ground level.
Who's talking to young men?
Well, exactly. Well, it's Andrew Tate at the moment,
and it's through gaming.
Yeah.
Call of Duty.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a problem in itself.
Yeah, big time.